Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and today we're going to talk about the next installment of Strong Women in Fiction. And for this one, I chose, I believe it's 3 books to start off this video with that are for the younger readers. But these characters grow up to be strong, independent, intelligent, thoughtful, kind women who know they can't do it all by themselves. So let's talk about them. One of my favorite books growing up from a very young age would be Madeline by Ludwig Bellmans. And I loved the story. It won a Caldecott Honor Book. It was first published. Well, that is a lie. I will put the year it was first published right here. I know I read this growing up. I loved this book. I love the illustrations. I love the story. I will read you the blurb that is on Amazon. The cherished childhood classic starring a fearless little girl and her 11 lovable housemates. In an old house in Paris that was covered with vines lived 12 little girls in 2 straight lines. The smallest one was Madeline. So begins the story of Madeline, a young girl living in Paris with her 11 closest friends under the care and protection of Miss Clavel. What she lacks in size, Madeline makes up for in courage. She is not afraid of tigers or mice, and even likes to stand out amongst the rest of the girls. Pickles the bird. Nothing seems to frighten her until one night when things take a scary turn. With its endearing and courageous heroine, cheerful humor, and whimsical drawings of Paris, acclaimed author and illustrator Ludwig Bellmans weaves a true classic that continues to stand the test of time. Let Madeline and her friends walk 2 straight lines right off the page and into your family's heart. Truly, I loved this book. If we had been blessed with kids, you had better believed this book would have been all over our house and everything else he had written because, well, it's just awesome. And next up would be another book I loved growing up. That is the complete 8-book collection of Ramona Quimby by Beverly Cleary. I burned through these books when I was young so quickly. Kids everywhere feel connected to Ramona's unique way of looking at the world as she tries to adjust to new teachers, encounters bullies at school, and puts up with her bossy older sister. The scrape she gets herself into, like wearing pajamas to school or accidentally making egg yolk shampoo, are funny and heartwarming and sometimes embarrassing. No matter what, Ramona's lively, curious spirit shines through. I read these books. In fact, I read everything Beverly Cleary when I was wee. The books are completely appropriate. You do not need to worry about the content thereof. They are great. Now, my next recommendation I'm going to tell you applies for the books written by the original author. I cannot speak to the vast volume of books published after she stopped writing the series. I am making no claim to that portion. That is the Nancy Drew Mystery Series by Carolyn Keene. The first book is The Secret of the Old Clock. And I devoured everything Carolyn Keene growing up. I have not read any of the new ones. I would not trust any of the new ones based on what little I have heard. But the old stuff, absolutely fine for if you have kids. The accidental rescue of a little girl who lives with her two great aunts leads to an adventurous search for a missing will. Longtime fans and aspiring detectives alike will enjoy solving this case alongside Nancy Drew in this suspenseful, action-packed thriller. Nancy is a fantastic role model. I read these when I got a little bit older. I had already loved mysteries by this point. This just solidified it as my go-to genre for all time. That has not changed. So if it is an old Nancy Drew, highly recommend. New Nancy Drew, I would steer clear. Just avoid the new stuff. So, okay. Those are probably all fairly obvious. So, next up would be the adult strong women. First up would be the Women in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. Do not judge the books by what the slop of Amazon put forward in the television show. They are not even remotely related to one another. Don't ask me what just so the women in the books are powerful, brave, courageous. They don't, they all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. They rely on one another. They aren't afraid to rely on the men in their lives. The entire, admittedly, I've read like 4 books in the series, but the women stand out and are equal to in the writing with the main character, who is Rand, who is a man, and who is the character the series revolves around. But without the women in his, village that go on the journey with him, without, a second thought to their own personal safety, they just go because he needs them. That just continues through. I loved this story. So I'll read you the brief blurb for the first book. The first book, by the way, is The Wheel of Time. Since its debut in 1990, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan has captivated millions of readers around the globe with its scope, originality, and compelling characters. The Wheel of Time turns, and ages come and pass. What was, will be. What was, what will be, and what is may yet fall under the shadow. Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time. I cannot stress how much I appreciate Robert Jordan's ability to write a strong woman character that is still compassionate and thoughtful and intelligent without overly sexualizing her and without resorting to sex as a weapon. I love this series for that. It's fantasy, by the way. Okay. Next up would be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. He has since passed away. The series is being continued by another author. This is Swedish crime noir. If you know, you know. It's that Nordic dark. If you're a very sensitive reader, you need to skip this book. Just going to say skip this series. I'm also going to recommend reading this, not listening to it. There is a lot of Swedish naming, and it can be incredibly confusing if you are not looking at the page. There are currently 8 books in this series. I enjoy this rating, despite its, ability to swear. Our main character is, what's her name? Lisbeth. And she has no trouble telling you what she thinks and doing what she wants and helping. It may not be the help you thought you needed, but it will be help. So I'll read you the blurb. Harriet Vanger, a scion of Sweden's wealthiest families, disappeared over 40 years ago. All these years later, her aged uncle continues to seek the truth. He hires Mikael Blomqvist, a crusading journalist, recently trapped by a libel conviction, to investigate. He is aided by the pierced and tattooed punk prodigy Lisbeth Salander. Together, they tap into a vein of unfathomable inequity and astonishing corruption. I loved this book. I am continuing this series. However, like I said, if you are a sensitive reader, you need to skip. Okay, next up would be the series that the lovely Miriam turned me on to. That is Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. The first book is appropriately titled Maisie Dobbs. And this is not a cozy, and this is not a hard-boiled mystery either. It's historical fiction. It is a mystery, but it doesn't fit neatly into any particular genre or subgenre other than woman sleuth, which is just pointless. I will read you the description. Maisie Dobbs, a psychologist and investigator, began her working life at the age of 13 as a servant in a Belgravia mansion, only to be discovered reading in the library by her employer, Lady Rowan Compton. Fearing dismissal, Maisie is shocked when she discovers that her thirst for education is to be supported by Lady Rowan and a family friend, Dr. Maurice Blanche. But the Great War intervenes in Maisie's plans, and soon after the commencement of her studies at Girton College, Cambridge, Maisie enlists for nursing services overseas. Years later, in 1829, having apprenticed to the renowned Maurice Blanche, a man revered for his work with Scotland Yard, Maisie sets up her own business. Her first assignment, a seemingly tedious inquiry involving a case of suspected infidelity, takes her not only on the trail of a killer, but back to the war she had tried so hard to forget. So, 1929, England. She sets up her own business. She's her own boss. She sets the rules. She has men working for her. Maisie is a very strong character. She went through, World War I. She's helping veterans recover from that. She is a very complex, very compassionate, very intelligent, and she doesn't hide it character. And I am deeply appreciative of Maisie Dobbs, and I am enjoying her immensely. She is just fantastic. So, last up on the Strong Woman volume, I believe it's 3. That would be Full of Grace by Dorothy Benton Frank. As you know, I read this earlier this year. I absolutely fell in love with this. This is a standalone novel. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, which is how I read it. I will read you a little bit of the blurb. A moving story of the power of love and the miracles of life. Chock full of southern wit, sass, and charm. Grace is an intelligent, struggling to be independent, 31-year-old single woman living in sin. with the man she'd marry if they weren't both so commitment phobic. Michael is a doctor and a scientist, and Grace has a good idea that he's also an atheist. Over the years, this dutiful Catholic girl has become ambivalent about her faith, but her family is as devoutly old-fashioned as it gets. The stage is set for a major showdown that might just change Grace's outlook on life, family, and the South itself. As I said earlier this year when I read this book, I can't say too much about this book without spoiling the book. I will say that Grace is the epitome of a strong, faithful, intelligent, generous woman that has issues and works through them and is reasonable and mature and doesn't expect the world to revolve around her. I cannot recommend this book enough. It is probably easily approaching one of my top reads of the year, and I still think about this book months after I read it, which is the highest praise I can give any single book. So, okay. Have you read any of these? If so, leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.